Good morning and welcome to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. And now, Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
Well, good day to everybody. Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Getting underway, Kyle Zander alongside Scott Wardell. Scott, how are things going?
Very good, and happy Saturday to you. It actually feels like fall a little bit here today.
We've been, I think we've been spoiled with the weather as of late. You know, we've been 80 degrees in October. What's going on with that?
Right.
And now we're getting hit with it.
It's real fall.
And welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back. We've got some good stuff for our listeners here today. We're going to be talking about retirement income planning. I have a guest with me, Jeff Dunkel, and I'm going to introduce Jeff here in just a minute. And Jeff's got 24 years of experience in investments and financial planning, so we're delighted to have you on the air here with us today, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So at any rate, we got some great stuff going here today.
Scott, before we get started, give us a quick update of what happened in the financial markets this last week.
Well, this has been one of the better weeks, to be sure. We've been on this roller coaster ride of the stock market, having dramatic turns both up and down. And this week, of course, was one of the big up weeks for the markets. And, the Dow, the 30 industrials, they were up about 4.8, I think was the actual number. But the broader market, the S&P 500, was up about 6%. So, and the reason that I just really want to make sure that we mention this every week is because one of the themes that I'm going to use the word harping. I've been harping a little bit on folks and on our listeners to make sure they've got adequate defense built into their portfolios. A lot of people would say, well, I don't even have a portfolio. And many times when we sit down with folks and we have a conversation with them, in fact, they do have a portfolio. If they've got a 401k, they've got an IRA, they've got some investments out there, they have a portfolio. And we've been talking repeatedly about making sure that they have the right amount of risk built into the portfolio to match their personal risk tolerance and making sure that they've got good defense. Well, the time to really start making adjustments and putting defense into your portfolio is typically not when it's down or close to the bottom. It's when it is and the market is doing better. While the market has done better this last week, we are actually at the point where we are about even with where we started this year. So if you're going to make some adjustments, or if you feel like you need to make some adjustments, or if you just really feel, I should probably sit down and make sure I've got the right balance of investments for the amount of risk that I'm comfortable taking, now's the time to do it. So the markets were strong this week. This is a great time to start to assess your portfolio. It's usually not the best time when the markets are down, but they've done well.
Our topic for today, retirement income planning. Scott, I know there are several models out there for people to choose from when they're planning out their retirement income. Tell us a little bit about how some of them work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to really get Jeff involved here in a minute, but I want to give a little context for what retirement income is about. And so if our listeners are retired, or if they are within 5 years of retirement, then this is going to be really pertinent stuff for them here today. Basically, if you take a look at the history of retirement income planning, the past model most people have heard about in some discussion on whether it was a talk show or whatever, but we call it the 60-40 model. And the 60-40 model is really where you have approximately 60% of your investments in growth. That is probably going to be stocks, and about 40% of your investments in bonds. Now, that is a rule of thumb that people have used for years. It is not specific to anybody's overall risk tolerance, so that for many people they might have 80-20. For somebody else it might be 50-50. The idea of the 60-40 model, however, was that as you approach retirement, you would adjust those percentages, and the 60-40 model eventually, as you get to retirement, turned into a 40-60 model. Now you have 40% in growth and 60% in income. It's a really antiquated model, to tell you the truth, because it's way too general. It doesn't fit people's specific risk tolerance. And honestly, when you take a look at what happened in 2008 into the beginning of 2009, it just didn't work well at all, because it didn't have necessarily enough money built into the cash reserves. So people, let's face the facts, is during the 2008-2009 market recession, let's call it that, where the market receded. Frankly, what happened is although stocks went down as much as 54%, bonds were down about 18%. So it didn't matter where you took your money from, you were taking it at a low point in either one of those markets. So not having adequate cash reserves really, really hurt that market. So the next thing that came along is some folks sat down and said, gosh, some things have happened differently in the investment planning, especially retirement planning. And the biggest thing was back in the very, very early 80s that pensions started to go away pretty rapidly and 401ks started to come in. Well, the good news about pensions is who managed it? The pension fund manager. All you really did was you went to work, money was put aside for you, and when you retired, there was a check that came out. And there's all these brilliant people in the background, mostly brilliant, who were managing those dollars, and you just had to worry about that check coming to you. Well, after the change over to 401ks, the new pension fund manager in America became who? The person who owned the account. They were now responsible for all of this. So what happened is there's a group of folks that were really analyzing this, and they said, we've got to really give people some of the same tools that pension fund managers have and think about, and put it down into a micro basis. And on the micro basis, meaning how does this work for an individual? And they came up with these buckets of money. So you'd have a bucket for the first 5 years retirement, a bucket for the next 5 years retirement, maybe the next 5, and they would be growth buckets, and you'd have the ability then to harvest that money and transfer it over. Well, that worked as a theory, but frankly, without a specific tool that was there to help people understand, hey, it's time to harvest money from that bucket and bring it over, there was still a lot of people that had way too much in the growth buckets when the market was down substantially. So it's another model that really didn't work all that well, but the concepts were so good. So then finally along the way comes a system, a retirement income system, where it assesses what your current situation is, and one of the most important things that we do with any retirement income planning is we match up a person's expenses. And anybody who's retired will raise their hand and understand this one. When you're retired, cash flow is king. Cash flow is king. You've got to have the match up between your expenses and your income. And so when you start matching those two things up, and then you have these buckets of money, that being your cash reserve, your income bucket, and your growth bucket, and you have a plan for the money to flow from one to the other when certain things hit, and you've got an instrument to measure it and say, where are we this year? Are we in a good growth spot? Do I need to refill my income bucket? That's really where we're at today, and that's the system that I really want us to talk about today. And so a long prelude there, Jeff, but I really wanted to give our listeners some context of how we got to where we're at today. You've had 24 years experience in both the investment world and the financial planning world. And I know you've been working hard with Thrivent, and Thrivent has come up with this retirement income system for its members. I'm going to let you, Jeff, tell us a little bit about how the system works.
Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. The system that we use helps clients grow their retirement assets that's consistent not only with their needs and goals, but also their investment risk tolerance. When clients get ready to retire, we use an income management tool to give a little stress test to to utilize using about 1,000 scenarios and look at different things that could happen to their portfolio over the course of their retirement. This means that we take a look at their income needs and pit them against their expenses in all sorts of different interest rate or performance environments as well as inflation environments.
Sure.
And clients basically, they want to know that they're going to be okay in retirement. The biggest concern most of them have is, will I run out of money?
Right.
And this is a great resource to find out the probability that someone could run out of money.
Exactly. And, we always say here on the show that in the first phase of retirement, you're saying, how long will my money last? In the second phase of retirement, you say, how long will I last?
Mm-hmm.
and, of course, people have those health concerns on their radar very, very early in retirement as well. But, it really is about how long will the money last. So you say it gives them a probability of how long their money is going to last because, of course, yeah, go ahead.
Yep, because, the probability is because we're trying different types of scenarios. We just don't know what's going to happen in the future. We knew what happened in the past, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we use a process called Monte Carlo analysis, much like you'd use when you go to Las Vegas or play the slots. And what it does is it takes a look at a range of anticipated results through various market conditions. For instance, one scenario might be high inflation, low returns. Another one might be low returns and high inflation, and it comes up with the probability of success. In other words, success means that our members will not run out of money during that scenario.
Right, and so we use the phrase here, it's kind of a personal mantra for me, that our job is to turn hopefully into predictably.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people when they retire, they're like, well, I'm going to save, in my 401k, I'm going to get the match, and then I hear the word hopeful, and they say, and hopefully, after doing all that for a number of years, things will work out, and I'll have enough money to retire. Mm-hmm. Well, what we know is that being hopeful is wonderful. Being hopeful and predictable, where you say, okay, here are the odds that this is going to work out given the possible market scenarios and other situations. That's really our goal, because it is far too big of a decision for people to make than just to have it purely hopeful.
And that's why we use a dynamic system as opposed to a static system. Instead of using average rates of return, for instance, which would be a static system, we vary those rates because we know that the markets are dynamic. And in looking at those types of scenarios, it gives us a real good idea of what could happen in the future, and then we're better able to prepare for those types of situations.
And Jeff, what you just talked about was actually the third system in retirement history, and that is what I call the Excel-based system. And, many people who have met with a financial advisor have had this conversation where they say, well, what would you say? Now, this is the financial advisor asking the client, what would you say we should put in for a good rate of return for the stock market over the next 15 years? And the customer gives them kind of a puzzled look and wrinkles their brow a bit and says, I don't know, what would you say? And the financial planner often says, well, over the last 20 years, and they go into the spiel, right? And the spiel is, over the last 20 years, the market's averaged 7.5%, so why don't we put that in? And then they put that in the computer. And then they say, well, what do you think about inflation? And then the customer says, I don't know, I guess it's about 2.2 or 2% now. What should we put in for the next 15 years? And they go back and forth this conversation, and they end up at 3 or 3.5. Well, what happens, as you know, Jeff, is when you take any sort of mathematical model and you say 7.5% per year, and you take that average as though the average is what's actually being produced every year, and you put it against a 3% inflation as though that's being produced consistently every year, you're going to have a pretty sweet model, but it's not going to reflect reality at all. But what it's going to do is going to beat inflation every stinking year, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And it's going to give you really a very Pollyanna, rose-colored glasses, if you will, kind of view. That's why what we're talking about today is a system that is much more real, much more able to judge what might actually happen. Wouldn't you agree?
That's correct, and that's why that type of a system has a real challenge in working. Back in 2008, as you alluded to, many people's 401ks became 201ks. And the big question is, what should I do at this point? Should I do something different or should I make a change? And this is a process, since it's dynamic, to help answer that question.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. We'll be back.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. I'm Kyle Zander. Our guest for today, Jeff Dunkel. We are talking about retirement income planning. Now, before the break, we were talking about the Monte Carlo system. How does that system, Jeff, compare to other modes of thought?
Yes, Kyle. Well, this system uses a strategy that's really designed around maximizing retirees' income while minimizing their risks. A lot of systems that are out there use average rates of return or a straight line projection. Now, with an average rate of return, it might overestimate someone's performance, but it also might underestimate their performance, where they could end up having less money than what they need for their retirement. So what Thrivent does is take a look at utilizing a tool that varies the type of performance and inflation over different types of scenarios, 1,000 different scenarios. We use a Monte Carlo type of a projection.
Sounds like gambling, doesn't it?
It
It's not, though. It's honestly not. But people use the word Monte Carlo, and they really kind of link it to the place itself. And let's see if my geography is right. In the Monte Carlo is in Monaco, right? Do I have that right? I've been there. I should know. But at any rate, it's not about gambling. It's about probability.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right. And that probability helps people make better decisions here. The probability such as using high inflation and low returns, or low returns and high inflation, and everything in between. Now that we see all the different types of scenarios that can occur, we can again make better decisions.
Right. And so what that means actually, for our listeners is it says it answers with some probability, and we really say worst case, best case, average case. Will my money last? And then from there, it's our job to make sure that we do the things that the system is helping to direct us to do. So it might be, as an example, well, your money has a higher probability of lasting if you had more in the income bucket. You need to fill that income bucket. It might be that you would have a higher probability of lasting if, in fact, we do more with the growth bucket. So, it's not just obviously the tool, it's the action taken by the advice of the tool and the system that really makes the significant difference. So, Jeff, who do you think the system is designed to help the most? I mean, it's probably not going to help everybody.
That's correct. I mean, if people are in retirement right now, it's going to help them out the most. Or if they're considering retirement, usually within the next 2 years, it's a great resource for someone to take a look at different types of scenarios, retirement situations that they might be anticipating, and testing them to see which one would work out best for them.
And the truth is there's so much that can be done as people approach retirement, that I really, really appreciate it when clients have the foresight to come in as much as 5 years ahead of the retirement date. And we start actually running the model for them to say, well, what's the probability that when you get to this date, there's, the money's going to last? Now, of course, the closer you get to the date, the more accurate the tool becomes. But an example is, if the tool starts to indicate that a particular client might need to do a lock-in, and we'll talk about lock-ins here in just a minute. But basically, if people look at their investments and they say, wow, I think I can retire where I'm at, but I can't afford to go backwards. I can't afford a backward slide. Well, in these markets, that's a pretty tough spot to be in. So what that means, what did we start the show with? The volatility of these markets. We also started talking about putting defense into the portfolio. So if someone's approaching retirement, there are several great ways that they can put some defense into the portfolio. And they may be 4 to 5 years away from retirement and need to actually start doing some of that, depending upon how they're already invested. So I agree with you totally that when they are in retirement, it works spectacularly well in terms of helping us provide good and solid advice with a model that gives us, as you say, this predictability. But boy, do I ever enjoy doing it with people 5 years ahead of time to really help get them prepared. It's really, really, it brings about a perspective that is different than a shot in the dark.
That's correct.
Now, Scott, I'll direct this question to you, Jeff. If you got any comments, you can say something about it too. How does this system help people with their choices about Social Security?
Well, one of the things that I was mentioning here earlier is that when you are retired, cash flow is king. You really got to figure out how to match your income and your expenses. So for many people, Social Security is a pretty important part of their retirement plan. And so what we do with the combination of Social Security and maybe pensions and maybe income from other sources and then income from their investments is we start to figure out what's the best overall match. So I've got these income streams coming in. And then from there we take a look at, and I usually do when I do this plan, which we call TRIO. It's really a little acronym that stands for Thrivent Retirement Income Optimizer. When I do that, then I go back and do another scenario. And on that scenario, I say, what if they waited, let's say they want to retire when they're 62, 63, 64, someplace in there. And then I'll go and do another scenario where I'll say, let's wait till full retirement and see what kind of a full retirement for Social Security, 66 and some fraction for most people. So for me, it's 66 and 2/3. Okay, so I go back and do it that way and say, now, what if I delay my retirement and retire then? Or what if I use some of my investment assets and some of my other income sources to create a bridge that gets me from age 64, let's say, to full retirement when I'm 66. So it gives us a mathematical analysis of how that works out. There's another part, of course. Whenever someone is taking a look at when they should take their Social Security, you've got to take some longevity into account. And people don't like to talk about longevity because, it's about you dying, right?
Right.
It's about you dying, it's about you living. But if, in fact, you have, great longevity in your family, if mom and dad lived well into their 90s, and you're likely to live into your 90s as well, you may make a very different decision about how long, when you start collecting Social Security, than if your family longevity is in their early 70s. Obviously, if you're going to likely not live past 75 because of health issues or whatever, you're better off most cases, and I emphasize most cases because we like to do the math, by taking an early Social Security. On the other hand, if you're going to live a very, very long time, that higher payment is probably going to be the right thing. Now, those are some extremes. I understand that. But that's why there is no hard and fast rule of thumb as to which is better. If you were to go to most coffee shops in America, you would have somebody who's saying, oh, I heard it's better if you, and they're going to say, wait till your full retirement. Or somebody else is going to say, or if you take it early. There is no rule of thumb on this. It's very, very individualized based on your investments, your ability to provide that cash flow, and your longevity. So that's what we like to really deal. But the tool itself can be extremely helpful to help figure that out and lay it out on paper rather than just make it guesswork.
Does a person need to have the plan updated each year, and if so, why?
Well, Kyle, here's the thing, is that's what's really different, is that you have to actually, if you're going to use a system that's going to help you make adjustments in your portfolio, it might be you need to actually take money out of your growth bucket, put it in your income bucket. It might be you need to refresh your cash reserves and increase that. It might be other kinds of adjustments within the overall picture. The only way that works is if you actually have it updated on an annual basis. The old systems that says, okay, here's your retirement plan and we've estimated 7.5% return on your investments and 3% inflation, have a nice retirement, did not work for many reasons. But one of the reasons is things change in both the investment world. Boy, if you don't know that, you've been living under a rock, right? And they change in terms of inflation and other things. So it would be like, here's the equivalent. If today's system were the equivalent of a GPS system, where it's actually guiding you as you go, then to turn it off at different intervals and say, well, okay, I think I know where I'm going. I'm going to turn my GPS off here for a while and then turn it back on and turn it back off. That's, the kind of response you would get if you don't do an annual review on these. So I think, it's something that people need to pay attention to. And even if it is not the most pleasant activity, because a lot of people really don't enjoy talking about money. They don't know the terms. They don't know a lot about how money actually even works. They don't know necessarily how interest works. They don't know how to necessarily what's the best way to manage debt. That's the very reason that you seek out the opinions of a financial advisor. The very, very reason. So I encourage people who have not gone to take the step to see a financial advisor because they may have felt intimidated or maybe even ashamed. In some cases, they've gotten themselves in some debt things and they're embarrassed. So they go and see. Those are the people that really need the advice the most. So I highly, highly encourage them to take the time to do that. And those that are in the system, boy, I tell you what, if I can use the word insist, I would insist that they would do an annual update so that they know where they're at, because that's when it really becomes valuable for them.
And it also helps people, a big decision there is, do I want to stay the course, especially if we have something happen that is unique in the financial markets. Do I need to stay the course or should I make a change? Now we can test out, different ways to answer that question and help them make the best decision possible.
Jeff, that's a great point, because the old school of thought was buy and hold. And I think the new school of thought that I would like people to think about is buy and manage. It doesn't mean, you get into the panic mode and you start to sell, but it means that at some point in time you might have to put some defense in the portfolio. Not sell out, but put some defense in the portfolio to protect yourself. Buy and manage, I think, is going to be the new term. So, folks, I encourage our listeners to hang on here today because we've got a lot more stuff coming up relative to some of their income streams. We're going to try and put this as much as we can in layman's terms so that if you're thinking about retiring, if you're getting close to retirement, or if you are retired, that hopefully there's a few little tidbits that you can take from today's program that says, you know what, if I can make this a more assured system and more predictable, how much better off might you be? So stay tuned.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
Nearly 3 million members look to Thrivent Financial for Lutherans to help them achieve their financial goal. Nearly 3 million people know that Thrivent Financial is committed to excellence in financial services and caring for others. Get to know Thrivent Financial and the quality of products and services they can offer you. In Minnesota, you have a host of representatives to help you with your financial needs. Contact your local Thrivent representatives Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstad, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731 or call 1-855-346-4332. Registered representatives for securities offered through Thrivent Investment Management Incorporated, member FINRA and SIPC.
Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Scott, it's bottom of the hour, so what's the deal for the day?
The deal for the day is a booklet, and people who have listened to the show before might know this is one of my favorite really booklets. It's called Managing Your Retirement Savings to Provide a Lifetime of Income. The very thing that we're talking about here today. And it really is a great little booklet, and it talks about some of the issues so that if you say, hey, I kind of understand what you guys are talking about, but I'd like to have some more information, this is a great little booklet. So here's the number that they need to call. It is 1-855-346-4332. 4332, and it's managing your retirement savings to provide a lifetime of income. You just call that number. There's nobody there today, so you'll be leaving a voice message for us. So be prepared to just give us your name, your address. A phone number also helps folks because oftentimes, for instance, somebody called in from, let's see, I think it was Dodge Center one day, called in from Dodge Center, and it got recorded in our book as Sauk Center. And so it kept coming back to us, and we were kind of frustrated because we were like, hey, we promised this person we're going to get them. So leave your phone number as well in case we have to check out your address or call you to get some clarification of that address. And today's booklet is Managing Your Retirement Savings to Provide a Lifetime of Income. It's a great little book, including, by the way, this little chart that I printed off here that talks about retirement income options. Income options now, not growth options. And it lists out some of the benefits and some of the features associated with CDs, of course, that's certificate of deposit, treasury bonds, deferred fixed annuities, immediate fixed annuities, life insurance cash value, variable annuities, mutual funds, bonds, and stocks, all in one cool little page where it gives you kind of the pros and the cons and the yeses and the nos. And so I would definitely call in to get this booklet today if you're on the path to educate yourself a little bit more about what are my income options when I'm retired.
That phone number one more time?
That phone number one more time is 1-855. This is a toll-free number, by the way. 1-855-346-4332. Okay, very good.
Our topic for today here on Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell is retirement income planning. I'm Kyle Zander alongside Scott Wardell. Our guest for today is Jeff Dunkel.
Yep, and Jeff, we got a question for you to start off our second half here. Is the system we've been talking about here in the top half hour here is a retirement income system. And one of the things that we know is it helps people or helps advise them when they're supposed to lock in or slow down. Explain what it means to lock in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. The locking in income means taking a portion of your assets and purchasing an income stream, and over time that's going to build up a guaranteed income for you that you cannot outlive. It also provides a high watermark. In other words, no matter what happens in the markets, what your income stream is it's not going to vary. It's either going to stay the same or it could go higher. Locking in also is helping you take advantage of those market gains and reducing the pressure on a portfolio that you have. Simply put, you're creating an income in addition to any Social Security or pension that you'll be receiving in retirement or lack thereof. And if your assets are in this dependable income, if cash flow seems to be the king in retirement, it leaves the remaining assets available for growth potential.
Which is, by the way, when you're saying it helps you take advantage of market gains, it can only help you take advantage of market gains by allowing you the ability to not touch it at other times, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. So it doesn't lock that in, but it just says, hey, when you got something going for you here in terms of the income, you're not going to have to necessarily do any cash in at those other times. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No problem. And Scott, you've mentioned a few times here about preparing for defense in your financial strategy. Can you expand upon that a little bit more for the listeners?
Absolutely, I'd love to. When you're thinking about putting defense into your portfolio, it can be a couple of different ways that you can do it. There are a number of companies that today offer some baseline guarantees on the amount that you've actually got invested, but still allow you to participate in some, if not most, of the market gains. So a defensive portfolio, and first of all, one of the things that we try and help people assess when we do their risk tolerance is to say, okay, if it looks like you need some growth, if mathematically it says, okay, you're going to be retired for a 30-year period of time, that's a fairly long horizon, you've got to get some growth, then how can you get some growth without having this backwards slide in the overall investment? So there's a couple different ways to do that. That's defense. The old-fashioned way to do defense, and I do not rule this out, by the way, is to put more into guaranteed kinds of investments. You know, it could be bank CDs, it could be U.S. Treasuries, that kind of thing. It could also be the very thing you just mentioned, is to create an income stream so that you can depend on that income stream while other assets grow. It could also be adjusting your portfolio so you have more in the income-oriented kinds of investments and less in the growth. It could be any of these things, but the trick is how do we do it and still get the amount of growth that we need? So, you know, I was working with a couple this week, and part of your question, of course, you know, you're talking about lock-in, but also slowdown. So, did you want to say a little bit about what's the slowdown piece that you know you might be looking at for that we look at when we were working with clients?
Right. In terms of slowdown, what we would be looking at is making again appropriate decisions when your expenses change during the year, and the slowdown is one of the ways that we can handle that. It's basically helping you make that pension or portfolio decision.
Yeah, exactly. And Jeff, let me just add a story about some clients I was working with this week, where we were working on this very system, and it turned out that after we assessed their expenses for the year, they needed about $59,000 worth of retirement income based on how they're living their lifestyle right now. Now, they have a relatively small investment portfolio, Social Security and income from one other source, which isn't a very big piece of income. And as we were talking and I looked at the investments, the system told us that they really needed to slow down by about $3,000 a year. That $56,000 was the number that was far more sustainable over the long haul than $59,000. So that's what my discussion with this couple was about, is it possible to cut $3,000 out of their budget in order to sustain how much they have? Because what you don't want this thing to go upside down on you. So if you think of it, in so many cases, and we've had these experiences, most people have, where they've seen that once they start taking an aggressive amount of principal out of their savings, and if they start taking too much, then the value of the savings obviously starts to go down a little bit more rapidly. Anything that you might have done similar to this, for instance, when you're first making your mortgage payments, this is now you're on the other side of the coin. You're paying all interest until you start to chip away a little bit at that principal. Once you start actually really carving, so let's say that you're in your 12th, 13th, 14th year of making your mortgage payment, you notice something. And what you notice is all of a sudden I'm making more of my payment towards principal than I am making it towards interest. And then you start chopping away at it pretty quickly, and it starts to feel really good because all those other years are frustrated because you're like, wow, all these payments and I've made no progress towards the principal. Now, put yourself on the exact opposite side of that. Now you're retired, and that principal is the equivalent of your investments assets, your retirement nest egg. Once you start taking more aggressively from that principal, you start to spend it down, if you will, to withdraw it and shrink it much, much faster. So that balance is the thing that we have to be very careful of, is to make certain that people aren't taking it so aggressively that they run out of money, in most cases unintentionally, right? So what the slowdown is to say there's probably, for some people, no need to slow down at all. And actually that turns out to be the case for many people. But if you knew that, hey, just a slight reduction in your expenditures in the course of the year is going to make this last much longer, wouldn't that be worth knowing? I would think so.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Are there any special considerations when planning for retirement income for someone who is receiving rental income from either a farm or a rental property?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, we've said it about 3 times here today. Cash flow is king when you are retired. And that's a huge part of many rural families, farm families, overall retirement picture is if they're going to rent the farm, or if they own any other kind of rental property, how does that fit into the overall picture? It's absolutely critical. So yes, we list it as a source for their retirement income next to Social Security. Now, again, you I think, Kyle, asked earlier about adjusting this model, on an annual basis. Well, here's the thing, is your farm rental income might not be adjusted annually, but you might adjust it every 2 years. You might adjust it every 5 years. It depends upon what commodity prices are doing. So it might, as has been the case here recently, people have been adjusting it upward, right? Because land rent has gone up. It is a critical piece, and for many, many farm families, it is the most critical piece, because for many of them, it's a bigger chunk than Social Security. So absolutely, cash flow is king, and it is super important that we do that. We also run a bunch of different scenarios to make sure that we've got this whole sustainability thing figured out, so that, if by chance farm rental income were to go down, what would the outcome be for someone's retirement? And not to confuse people by running all these scenarios, but saying, well, I ran one here, and it's still, for many cases, many people, it still looked pretty darn good. And there's also some special concerns, because many of the cases we run into, a farm family is also trying to get another family member started on the farm. So then you've got this scenario where you've got a balance between, well, I need the retirement income, but my son or daughter who's going to take over the farm could use a little break here on the rental. Where's that point of balance where I have enough income coming into me and I'm making it so that it is potentially more profitable for them? Really, really helpful to know where that dollar amount is and whether or not your retirement picture has enough flexibility in it so that you can actually make those kinds of adjustments. So, Jeff, I'm going to throw this one back to you. When we're talking about this retirement income system, are there any other requirements people need to know about in order to make this system work?
Yes, Scott, there are a few. First of all, clients should have at least $100,000 of investable assets to really utilize the benefits of this income system. And also, as we've mentioned before, the system really assumes that you're going to be meeting with the financial advisor at least on an annual basis in order to make those necessary updates to their assets, income, and, as we just got done talking about, their spending. And all those, with those two requirements being the primary requirements necessary to utilize the system.
Very good, Jeff. And thanks. And our listeners, hang on here. We've got more coming up for you, and we're gonna start talking more about how the system works for people who are already retired.
Called the Monte Carlo.
Yeah, it could be, but there's more to it than that.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/onething. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/onething.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Kyle Zander alongside Scott Wardell. Our guest for today is Jeff Dunkel. We're talking about retirement income planning. Now, let's talk about how the system works for people who are already retired, Scott.
Well, I'd have to say that about half, maybe actually it's a little bit more than that, but somewhere around half of the people that we run through the system are in fact already retired.
The Monte Carlo system.
Well, no, it's not. The Monte Carlo is a piece of the system. I know you love that piece of it, Kyle, because it sounds cool.
Yes, it does.
But really, what it's really about, the system helps people and gives them some assurance. And I use the word assurance because it is not guaranteed. It can't be guaranteed because We cannot predict exactly what is going to happen in the financial markets, but it does give them a probability spread that says, here's your worst case, here's your best case, and in between this is your average case. So a lot of people who are already retired, especially after what we've been through in 2008 and 2009, really have this basic question: will my money still last? Yeah, I may have been retired 5 years, I may have been retired 10 years, but they want to know, will my money last? I've also had countless people who say, you know, I think we could make some adjustments if we needed to, but we don't even know if we need to make these adjustments. And this is really, to my view, the best system that I have seen to help people really come about those kinds of adjustments. And the third scenario of people, frankly, are those people who have come to me and they've said, you know, we feel really good about our retirement income and our investments seem to be doing okay, so could we start on a gifting program? Well, one of the things, and we've used this analogy on the show before, is that people treat their investments similar to the spiel, if you will, that the flight attendant gives when you get on the airplane, and says that in the event that the cabin becomes depressurized, your oxygen mask will fall. Put yours on first. Why do they say that? Well, they don't want you to be a victim. It's the whole thing with retirement planning. In many cases, in most cases, the idea is to take care of yourself first, because then you can, in fact, do what? Help others. And so what many people come to us and say, you know, is there enough there? Because these are folks who are in that category where there is some surplus, and they're trying to figure out if they've got the ability to start helping others without hurting or damaging their own retirement picture. So the question is still the same. Do I have enough? But do I have enough to do some of these other things, you know, that I'm really interested in doing? So, yeah, the people that are already retired have, I think, have fit this system exceptionally well, or let's just say it the other way. The system fits them exceptionally well to answer some of those key questions.
Well, then what is the ideal age for someone to start thinking about the retirement income system?
Well, I'll start with that one, but then, Jeff, I want to get your opinion on it as well. But I'm not sure that it is so much, Kyle, an age thing as it is how close you actually are to retirement. So, for instance, if you're 45 years old and you said, I've been working really hard, I've been saving really hard, and I think that I'm going to go into semi-retirement at the age of 50. Now, that would be ideal for a lot of folks, but there are folks out there that are listening today where they've got that on their mind to say semi-retirement. Because let's face the facts, retirement is not today what it was years ago. So years ago, when my folks retired, they got a pension, which most people don't get. They collected Social Security, and they pretty much, except for the fact that Dad did volunteer work with United Way for about a year, they pretty much quit working in a normal sense and went off and did their hobbies and had fun and traveled and, you know, spent time with the grandkids. For many, many people today, retirement is going to be something that looks more like a semi-retirement blending into a full retirement later on. Why? Well, I know a lot of folks who actually love working, who love their job. I know a bunch of other folks who enjoy their job. I wouldn't say they love it, but they are going to need the income from part of that job or some other job during retirement. So the semi-retirement picture is really, really critical for most people to create that bridge. And of course, there's the big thing about health insurance. Many people will find a job to do what? To cover their health insurance costs. And the consequence of that is if they're going to retire early in a semi-retirement format or even a slowdown, folks. If you're thinking, gosh, I have been working my tail off for the last 5, 10, 15 years, and I would like to even just slow down my hours a little bit, take a little, maybe a small reduction in pay. What's that going to do to my retirement picture? What a great time to start this kind of analysis. So I think there's a variety of situations more than ages for people to use this tool. Jeff, your thoughts?
I would agree with you on that, Scott. The tool works best the closer you are, either in retirement, usually within 24 months, or in retirement, because we know what those values are. We know if there's a pension, if there's expenses, and so forth for health care. And but I like what you had mentioned before too. Within 5 years, you have more opportunity to make some changes and accumulate more money to help with those decisions once you do go into retirement. And that's where this system really shines. Is again, as these changes occur, what do we need to be doing? What should we change, or do we have to make a change?
Absolutely.
I guess it kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Scott, where there's not each individual person has their own scenario. So to put a hard limit on this is the point you got to start thinking about it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Right. And let's face the facts, is this is really a foreign and confusing ground for many, many people. They're like, I hear people all the time say, gosh, I don't know if I'll ever be able to retire. I just can't see it. And boy, do I like to sit down with those folks, because it is our job to help map it out. And until you've actually mapped it out, how are you going to see it? So I would say that this is one of those things in life where, rather than let it swim around and be confusing to you, pick up the phone, make that phone call. One of the things that we offer a free consultation. You know, this show is heard in most of outstate western Minnesota, and the many offices are represented. Pick up the phone, call. Whether it's your thriving financial person, but call a financial planner, a financial advisor, a consultant. Call someone and say, I'd like to sit down and just have a conversation with you about this. Most firms, certainly ours, will offer that consultation for free, and you might begin the process of goal setting and mapping out what your actual retirement looks like. So I highly, highly encourage that. Don't let this be one of those things that you put off, because the earlier you get started on it, the more that you're going to be able to do with it.
Do you think a lot of people, or maybe at least some people, are afraid to talk about it because it could be perceived as you're planning for the end?
Well, there's a variety of reasons, and actually that's a pretty good one, Kyle, because I've asked some people that I've gotten to know over time, and I remember a very, very poignant conversation I had with a man about, I'm going to say it's about 3 years ago, who said to me, as he was, he'd been, I guess I'd say pretty much self-employed. He was in a situation where he was working for a company, but as an independent contractor. And we were talking about business transition. How are you going to really get the value out of the business that you already have, and not, leave that value behind because you need it during your retirement? And how are you going to start to ease yourself, your person, into this retirement picture where you don't have this routine going for
Right.
you? And the routine is so important for so many people. He said a couple things which I thought were extremely revealing. He said, well, if I could stay working in the job I'm at and just hang around a little bit every day, he says, frankly, I just need a place to go read the newspaper and talk smart. That was the essence of it. And as long as he can read the newspaper, talk smart, and in his case, meet with some clients to help them better their situation, whatever consultant kind of situation that he happened to be in, that might actually work. But you have to start thinking about that. Then the other very poignant thing he said is, in a way, I feel like I'm writing my obituary. Whoa, I said, tell me about that. He said, well, this is all I've ever done. And yeah, I can go play golf and I can do some other things, but this is what gives me a sense of importance. So, it's a very emotional decision for so many people. And they really have got to get those goals planned out for themselves, because if they've not really looked beyond today and they've not seen, well, here are the other things that I'm going to be able to do while I'm retired that I've not been able to do in the past, then it's going to feel awfully empty. A few weeks ago, we had a guest on the show. His name was Jim Jensen. Jim retired when he was 49 years old. Is financially equipped as well as almost anyone I've ever seen to be retired. And he ended up in the third day of his retirement. He ended up hating it because he said, I woke up that third day after sleeping in the first two, realizing that no one really cared if I got up today or not. It was a very desperate feeling for Jim. And so what he did is he went out to explore what other things he could do. He's actually found, one of the best situations in his entire life. He'll tell you, I don't know if I've ever been happier than I've found now. Now, here's what I think people need to do. In the last, I guess, has it been a week or has it been 10 days now since we lost Stephen Jobs? Stephen Jobs had a very eloquent speech at Stanford University. If you've not seen it, go on YouTube and see the speech. It's fantastic. Yeah. One of the things he said is, people, he didn't put it in this word, so I'm going to start it out by saying people described him as a visionary. He said, I could not connect the dots going forward. I could only connect them going backwards. That's true in so many people's situations, but you have to increase the probability that it's going to work because Stephen Jobs always had a forward plan. Didn't mean he could connect every dot, but he always had a forward plan and a vision of where he was going and living his particular dream. That's what we want to help people do. Create that forward plan. Where am I going to be? And yeah, there'll be a few dots that get connected looking backwards, but it is really, really vitally important that people take that time, figure out what their goals are, figure out what they want to do, and of course, figure out what the finances are as well.
Real quickly, Scott, where can people go who are interested in getting more information on retirement income methods?
Absolutely. Well, I've got a couple of upcoming seminars I'd like to invite people to. I'm giving them in conjunction with some other Thrivent financial consultants. I've got one on October the 27th. That's in Prior Lake, Minnesota. That's going to be 6 p.m. at Fong's, and then we're going to follow at November the 1st at the same exact location. So call that same number, the 1-855-346-4332. If you'd like to go to that seminar, just leave your name and say, I'd like to attend that seminar, because we're going to serve dinner at it as well, so we have to make sure we got enough food.
This has been another edition of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your Saturday.
We hope you've enjoyed the past hour of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. Join us again next week for Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell on KMRS Morris.